Scott here again on Flip That Script to talk to you about a few things that are interrelated. One which was discussed a little bit in a previous video is boundaries. Another one is the gray rock method. And then also wanted to talk a little bit about not taking the words and behavior of toxic family members, abusive family members, personally. Not taking it personally is also a good way to frame the past and the disrespect and abuse that you've experienced. As I mentioned in an earlier video, boundaries are not about controlling others, because you can't really control others, but you can control your response to them. You can give them choices that are kind of related to the choices that you're making, giving them options, letting them know what the consequence for different choices is or are. And then most importantly, with regards to all of that, is following through with what you say will happen. A couple of the examples I gave when I first discussed boundaries a little bit, towards the beginning, when I was giving more of educational videos about what narcissism is and toxic family and the different aspects of it, is, for instance, if you were to say, if you call after 9 p.m., I'm not going to pick up the phone. Or if you insist on continuing to talk about that when I told you I'm not going to talk about it, I'm going to hang up. Or if you're somewhere in person with the same issue and some topic that you're deeming undiscussable and off bounds, I'm going to walk away. And as I said, the most important thing is that you actually follow through on that consistently. What you have to understand, it might sound like a little bit of a contradiction. It's important to set boundaries, but at the same time, you have to understand the toxic, narcissistic, bullying type family members are going to trample all over your boundaries and violate them. This relates to their lack of insight, their lack of empathy, and the fact that they're emotionally immature. That's why following through on what you're telling them are the consequences for various behaviors is so important, the same way that it is with a toddler. For this reason, you may have to tighten up your boundaries, meaning that you may have to restrict things even more. In my case, in the story that I told, I decided to give my father an opportunity after going no contact with a year with him. That was for me. Your boundaries are for you. for your own self-protection, for your own peace of mind, well-being, self-respect, and sanity. You can have a boundary and loosen it and tighten it. I made the mistake. I wouldn't say it's a mistake because we always are learning, growing, and evolving. Narcissists never do. When I gave him a chance, that was me removing a boundary. But in the letter I explained it was with conditions. When he violated those conditions on 3 occasions, I tightened and reestablished the no contact boundary. So, the gray rock method is a type of boundary because you are, and this takes great discipline, you are deciding to be less engaging, less disclosing, and also less reactive. What you really are looking for is zero emotional response. Gray rock is very frustrating to abusive people. The thing to keep in mind, and I implemented this when my father had the chance to call me, at least actually not so good, because it takes a great deal of discipline. I did very much gray rock him when he called me right before I went no contact, when I'd been educating myself about all these topics. It takes a great deal of discipline to do gray rock, but the reason that it becomes effective immediately, but then may take longer because they're going to probably still try to get that pellet. Think about it as in regards to the fact that before you really started learning about this stuff and what was wrong with your family members that are toxic and abusive, is they really get off on your reaction. They are fishing for information. They treat relationships and life like they're playing a card game, and they always need to be one up. So although they're very guarded and you can't really ask them a lot of questions for them to be disclosing, they're always trying to be in a one-up position to question you. And what they love to do is to put you on the defensive, to get you to try to prove yourself, explain yourself, or defend yourself. And they like to try to do what they can to get under your skin, to get you in defensive mode. So gray rock is a defense against their tactic of trying to manipulate you and manipulate getting some kind of emotional reaction out of you to gain their narcissistic supply. So, if you're not giving them what they want, and it's called gray rock because you're trying to be as boring as like a gray rock. Not happy and excited, like maybe in a way to defy them that they're not going to get to you and things are great with you. But not letting their abusive and critical comments to get to you. they may ramp up their attempts to do this, which would make sense, like I was saying, because that's like that rat trying to get that pellet. And they might have to keep trying to push on that lever more. So, it takes a great deal of discipline. And it's really, in many cases, like you have to go against your nature. Because the targeted scapegoat, a lot like me, is probably usually a pretty empathetic, open, and friendly person. So, we might by nature be people that want to open up and don't feel guarded and like we need to keep our cards close to our chest. Unfortunately, when you have these type of family members, you really should and probably always should have, but like me, you probably didn't know better when you didn't know what their problem was. Now, I wanted to relate doing Grey Rock to that concept of radical acceptance. Radical acceptance also can be a very long and difficult process because it really is hard to wrap your head around the fact that your family member or family members are actually really wired much differently than most people. Lacking empathy, needing to dominate, very self-absorbed, critical, needing to try to get these reactions out of you, and manipulative, and they really don't have interest in other people, even people they profess to love. They really don't care what's going on with you. Everything is self-referential. But radical acceptance and just understanding that they just are the way they are is what can help you to start to learn to take their behavior less personally. And when you can learn to take it less personally through working on radical acceptance, it makes gray rocking much easier as far as not allowing yourself to have the kind of emotional response that they want. And apart from that, you really have to be discerning and always keep in mind who you're dealing with and what is unhealthy about them and wrong with them, that they're disordered or at least very much have highly toxic or narcissistic traits. That's with regards to keeping your answers to a minimum. That's a different thing than not giving them the emotional reaction or response that they're looking for. Having short, simple, neutral kind of answers, almost treating it like it's a business transaction or something. And don't forget that you do not have an obligation to even answer their questions. You can give short, simple, unemotional response to say, I'm not comfortable telling you that. So, the other thing that I wanted to mention about gray rocking is gray rocking often goes hand in hand with what may become a long-term decision for some of you to have very low but cordial and superficial contact. Something else that some people do is start to use gray rock as they're starting to go through their grieving and healing, while they might be considering eventually going no contact. It's kind of a good segue, and if you're going to go this route, would give you practice with learning to become more and more disengaged and to start to feel less and less invested in the relationship, less invested in what they think, and learning over time to eventually radically accept that they are the way that they are, which ultimately is the sad but harsh reality and reason that you do need to start to figure out what to do. But gray rock is absolutely very highly recommended for any further contact from the point at which you begin to understand and acknowledge and educate yourself about toxic and narcissistic family members.